All right, welcome back. This is going to be a kind of a first for on video, at least. I'm going to be working in my shorts so you can see my chicken legs. All right, so we got 1998 Toyota Avalon. We've done a few things of work on this, a few jobs on it. This year, today's job is going to be struts front and rear. Now, normally we would take the strut assembly out, compress the spring, remove the cartridge, put the new cartridge in, release the spring, and then put the assembly back in. The customer decided that he wanted springs because the ride is getting really soft, starting to go down in the rear of the vehicle. So we're going to use what is called a quick strut, which is a strut and a spring assembly all in one. It makes the labor easier for me. So why don't we get going, and we'll catch you in a minute. Okay, so we're down at the bottom of the car, or on the side of the car, and this is the strut, this is a spring, and there's also a strut mount on some cars. I don't know if there's a mount on the top of this one. There's some sort of mount, but some cars it's a bearing plate, and other cars it's not. We don't really have to be concerned with it because we're replacing the entire thing in one shot. So what we got to take off here, we got the mounts, the lower mounting bolts. So we got that. We also have this sway bar attachment or end link that we got to disconnect from the strut. We have the ABS cable and the brake line that we have to take off from the strut assembly. So we're going to take care of this first, and then we're going to go up on the top and take off the 3 top bolts that hold the assembly in place. So let's get to work here. Okay, that's off, and then there's a clip here for the ABS cable that just flops out of the way. But one thing you need to make a note of is which side the strut is on relative to the cable and the brake line. So the last thing you want to do is put the strut in and now the cable's over here, okay, or gone behind it. So we got to be concerned about that. Next I'm going to take off is this guy here. Okay, need one more tool. Okay, next we need to take this assembly off, and if you look, this is clean. I already cleaned it off with a brush so that I can get to the center of the bolt nut, or the link nut, or not the nut, but the bolt end, the threaded end. There's a reason why there's a hex in the middle, is so that you can hold it. The one thing you don't want to do is take your power tool, particularly if you're going to reuse this component, and spin the nut and spin the ball inside the socket, because you can cause an incredible amount of wear in just a few seconds by spinning that ball in there, and then that just adds play to it. We don't want to do that. So they provided hex here so that we can hold it in place. Oh, we gotta get their ratchet wrench in the right orientation. There we go. Okay. All right, so now that that is out of the way, and it has actually a little bit of play into it already, and see how it's, a new one will hold its position. So that should probably be replaced, but that's the end of the customer's worry here. All right, so now time for the big toys. Take this bit off. Let me get a screwdriver real quick. I'll be right back. All right, so now that we're getting to the point of taking these bolts out, what we want to do first is put a scribe mark that follows the shape of this on the spindle. Not every car, but some cars, these bolts are actually in alignment for camber on the wheel or hub assembly or spindle, and they can be eccentric. I don't know if this is the case, but bottom line, when I'm done, I want to make sure that the spindle is in the exact same position as the strut. So I always just do a simple scribe mark. Then I'll do it on the opposite side as well. A lot of dirt here, so cleaning the dirt. Okay, so we now have two good scribe marks that will help me realign it. And then I don't have to worry about an alignment if these are eccentric. I don't know if they are or not, but at this point it doesn't matter. So we take our socket, put it on our gun, make sure the gun is rotating the right way. It is. Be clear of your ABS, and just like that. Now you'll notice that I held the bolt in place and took the nut off. You don't want to do the other way. You don't want to spin the bolt and hold the nut, just in case. And these aren't, but again, some cars, they're serrated. They have splines in them, and if you start spinning that nut, you just oblong the hole. So always hold the bolt. I keep changing the name of this. This is the bolt. This is the nut. You don't want to spin the bolt. Okay, so there's two here, so we need to get to the bottom one. Just like that. You see how that spindle popped out? You have to put a little help on it. Okay. And we are free. Now, you saw that it didn't take the axle shaft nut off. I left that in place. 99% of the time, you do not have to mess with the axle shaft, the brakes, the brake rotors to change the strut. So now, the strut is loose. We have 3 bolts on the top that we got to get to. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back. We're in the engine compartment. These are the 3 bolts that hold, or the nuts that hold the strut assembly to the top of the car. There's some sort of mount here that we don't have to worry about it because we're replacing it completely. Some cars, these are oblong holes or oval holes, and it gives you a little bit of adjustment. Sometimes they're this way and sometimes they're this way. Some cars, even more of the high performance vehicles, will have a plate that allows full adjustment, front to rear, and then left to right, or inside outside, so that you can get a better adjustment, a more specific alignment adjustment. This is a plain Jane Toyota. It's like a really fancy Camry. They're not worried about it. So all we got to do is just start taking them off. So I pulled out the big gun today. I love this. This is my Matco air ratchet MT2858. When I bought this, this was the most powerful air ratchet that you can buy. I can tell you, working at the shop, my co-worker technicians were afraid to use this because if it jammed your knuckle into something, it would hurt. And I've bruised my knuckles with this, but you'll see what gets the job done. Okay, I always, when doing struts, I just leave the nut on a few threads. Okay, and now when you take this last one, you'll see it drop. But that's the reason why I leave these on, so that it drops when I'm ready. Okay, set down the ratchet. Now come on over to this side, and what you'll see is I will grab the strut, force it up, and then I can remove the nuts while I take on the weight. And there we have it. There's the strut. Now this is the strut mount here. And see how it can turn? There's a bearing plate on it. And also you need to make note, see the arrow, and see the white dot to the outside. Okay, so we don't have to do anything further than this. We're getting a complete whole assembly. We're waiting for it to show up from the parts store. Normally what we would do is put clamps on it and compress the spring down, and then we can loosen the nut. The cartridge will drop out, which is the cartridge is the shock, and the bottom plate will drop out. We slip the new one in, tighten it up, release the spring, and then finish tightening the center nut, and then we go back in place. So there we are. We're waiting for the other ones to show up from the parts store. I'm going to go ahead and take the other front one off, and then we'll get back to the video. All right, so we're on the back. It is almost the same as the front on this car, but other cars you may have multi-links attached to the spindle that you may have to get out of the way. The difference on this one is the caliper is right in front of the bolts, or the nuts of the bolts. So what I'm going to use is a wrench to take the nuts off, and holding the bolts with a ratchet and socket. So it's pretty much the same. The other difference is in the trunk area. Some cars you have to remove the back seat. Other cars you have to remove the blanket material or the side materials off the inner liner of the trunk, so that you can get access to the top of the strut assembly, the mounting bolts. So we won't show that part, just because it is the personal space of the customer. We don't need to be showing what they have in the trunk for the rest of the planet. So I'm just going to take this off here, and then we'll return to the video when the new parts come in and we get ready to reassemble. So let's get to work. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is take my brush and clean this. I'm cleaning it so that I can get inside the hex. All right, and then we're going to break it loose with a wrench, and then we'll hold it with the Allen. Break it loose, just like that. Here's the Allen. And we want to hold this. This is very important, because you don't want to spin the shaft of the sway bar link pin here and ruin the ball and socket that they have. And this is the other reason why we take the dirt off, so that the nut comes off easier. You don't want to have to be fighting dirt and grime on that shaft. So this is a ball and in a socket assembly, and you don't want to spin that. Now, some of them don't have the hex in the middle of the shaft, but they do have flat spots so that you can put a wrench on it at here. The difficult part about that is you need a narrow wrench to get in between the plate and the ball and socket. But that's how you hold it when they don't have the hex in the shaft. So the next I'm going to do is the brake line and ABS line. Normally I would leave the bolt in the hole just so that I don't lose it, but we're replacing it so that can go down. Oh, I need a 10 millimeter, so let me go get a tool and I'll be right back. All right, so I got the 10 millimeter. This is for the ABS cable. Okay, got that out of the way. Now we get to remove the big strut bolts, but we got to scribe our mark for the alignment. Okay. Warm day today. All right, so we're just gonna get this loose. Oh, she's on there. Oh. All right, well, looks like we're taking that caliper off because that bolt is on too tight. So we'll be back. Okay, now that the caliper bolts are loose, you don't have to take the whole caliper off, just the bracket. The caliper will stay on the bracket. As long as you don't disturb anything, you can slip it right back on. So we get that out of the way. Okay. Now one thing you don't want to do is let the caliper dangle by the brake hose. So find a place to wedge it or get some mechanics wire or a bungee cord or something to hold the caliper so that it doesn't stretch the brake hose. Now we have room for the bolts, for the nuts, I mean. And let's see if we can hold them. The wrench. Okay, there's one. There's two. Okay. Now when we were doing the fronts, I talked about how the bolts could be eccentric. What they will have is a low spot on the shank of the bolt, and as you rotate the bolt, it will move the spindle inside or outside in relationship to the strut, and that's how you align the camber. Now in some cases, if your camber, when you're doing alignment, is off so much, you can purchase, you got a B here, you can purchase an eccentric bolt to do the alignment so that you get more adjustment out of your camber. All right. Oh. Okay. So now that we got the bolts out, the strut is loose. On this particular application, the suspension assembly can droop down so much that it can put tension on the cables or the brake line. So I got a jack stand just to hold it in place. No big deal. And then when we get ready to put it back in place, we just lift it up. Again, no big deal. So now, all right. So the strut is loose. We're now going to start in the trunk and release the top of the strut. But again, we're not going to show that. The strut is loose, and now we go to the top of the strut inside the trunk. But we're not going to show that because it is customer's personal property. So we'll get back to you when the strut gets out. Okay, so I lied. You don't have to go into the trunk, but you do have to remove the seats. So the bottom seat has clips that hold it in place. They're just clips, there's no bolts. You have to, so I used a thin pry bar metal to pry up on it, get the seat up. There's 3 tabs on the lower seat. That comes out of the way. The next thing you got to do is pull the seat belts out, unbolt the seat belts, which are 14mm hex. Those come out, and then you take the seat belts, undo the shoulder holders for the strap for the shoulders, and flip them up onto the rear deck. Then you undo the 3 bolts, or there's 2. One of the third ones is for the seat belts. They're 12mm and on the either side, the left and right side, far side. Then you got to grab the seat and give it a good heave upward. It's good to have a friend to help you here. I used my assistant, my son, and we got the seat up, and then it folds over. Then you have sound deadening material that you got to fold over the corners. I just took the corners and fold them down, and there's access for the 3 bolts on the top of the rear struts. Okay, so we got the rear seat out, and on the back of the seat are metal hooks. They're steel loops of steel, and there's 3 of them. So you have to lift the seat up to make sure that it clears these tabs here. Then you have the sound deadening material, and you just peel back the corner. Then you have access to the three mounting bolts that stick up. So there you go. That's how you get the struts out. And now we're waiting for the new ones to show up from the parts store, and we'll get going on this. Thanks for watching. Hey, we forgot to shoot a closing on this video. So we are, I think, 5 days later. And the car is gone. I test drove the car after I put those struts in, and it's like a brand new car. However, and I told the customer this, don't get mad at me when you feel a rough ride, because it's going to take a while for these springs and the mounts and the struts themselves to kind of bed in or seat in, get comfortable in the position that they need to be in. So it's going to be a rough ride for a few days, but I drove it and it felt like a brand new car. It's hard to explain, but when you accelerate or push down on the throttle, the suspension no longer has to bind up before the car can go. So it's like putting a couple horsepower on the car again. And it's a nice feeling. It's the throttle response is quicker, the handling is better, going over bumps, it's quiet. The car doesn't dive when you slam on the brakes. And you know, I'm not a light person, and when I first got in the car, you could feel the car jostle. Now it doesn't do that. It holds its shape, or holds its height. So in closing, that's the procedure for changing quick struts on a Avalon. Subscribe, tell your friends about my channel. We're trying to grow here, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.